What's going on, Wolfpack? Had to shine the light on your boy, but welcome back. Welcome back to another episode of Market Watch Mondays. As always, I'm your host, Mike, at Mike Me Up with 2Ps on Twitter. Thank you for joining me again. I'm recording this right before I go upstairs to the rooftop to watch Championship Sunday with some friends in my place that I'm at. Actually, fellow Chief fans, so they'll be rooting for Mahomes. I'm neutral. I'm just rooting for a good game because all my teams got eliminated, so it's actually pretty relaxing. Just looking for a good time, good game, so hopefully we get that. But I'm recording this episode before I head on up there, so I won't have any results of the games, won't have any of that. But I wanted to talk a little bit quickly. I want to do a little bit more of a dive on one of the topics that I've mentioned before. But before we get into the business, y'all know what time it is. Hit that intro. All right, so a couple housekeeping items first. As I mentioned last week, these episodes will be going back on the main channel at BDGE. So I got that linked in the comments below for y'all. So make sure you guys go on over there, check that out on the weekly. We're going to have more Dynasty content coming at you. Praise the Lord. At FB God, Noah Pyers himself is coming back to the channel. So he took a bit of a break, my fellow partner in crime, but he's coming back. We added another Noah Hills. If you guys don't follow him on Twitter, make sure you do. I'll link that in the comments below as well. But just a super funny guy. I think I followed him for a while. He's just like a really good personality. Kind of fits well with the Big Dogs persona. So he'll be creating content for there on the show as well. So that'll be 3 of us plus the Godfather himself, Nick, will also be contributing Dynasty content over the off season. So as I said, like we wanted to get more continuous Dynasty content out to y'all because for the past few months it's just been me. I'm sure y'all have been getting bored of my face, so hopefully it's good to get a couple new fresh faces in there, a couple new topics. We're gonna link up and talk about get on a call and talk about like what the schedule looks like, what the content looks like for the off season, so you guys are getting a full download of Dynasty content from our brains, however small they may be, directly to yours. So I'm excited about that. So make sure you guys stay tuned and keep track of that. Like I said, it couldn't just be me by myself because I'm still going to do this show, Market Watch Mondays. This is still my marquee show. This is still the piece of content that I've cared about the most ever since I started making video content for you guys. So don't worry, nothing's going to happen in Market Watch Mondays, but there will be added more content to the Dynasty flow from Big Dogs Gotta Eat Entertainment Media. I don't even know if that's what it's called. That's what I think it's called. That's what I think it should be called. So Nick, if you're Godfather, if you're fucking watching out there, make sure you change the name to that. I'm just kidding. I don't know what I'm talking about there. But anyways, let's get into the business. Okay, the main business this week. Some of y'all out there are degens like me, and you are going to have rookie drafts before the NFL draft, right? And this video is for you guys. If for a lot of you guys out there that are going to wait for the NFL draft to have your rookie draft picks, this video will still be relevant for you because one day you might want a degen like me. But two, I'm still going to talk about a lot of players and how I think about the business, how I approach rookie drafts. So it'll be good for everyone, but it'll be very, very tailored towards those people that do have rookie drafts before the NFL draft. And I want to explain a little bit of why my ranks are the way they are. Like if you think back. Actually, before I do that, let me just convince you why you should do drafts before the NFL draft. It's actually really fun. So I used to be against it 'cause I'm like, okay, I want to wait for more information. I want to wait for draft capital, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But for those of you in the know that are true DJs like myself that are doing the research well ahead of time, you have the biggest edge when it comes to drafting before the NFL draft, right? Because everyone else, it relies heavily on draft capital, right? And that's fine. We do too. But if you know your players, if you're doing the study in college, if you're following the mainstream NFL media, draft capital analysts, like you have a good sense of who some of these players going on the top are, right? And every once in a while you get like a Tyler Johnson or a Seth Williams or whatever. But even those guys, before the NFL draft came last year, I knew to move them down my ranks. Even though I love Seth Williams, I moved him way down my ranks. I was already getting the sense that he was not going to get the draft capital to succeed. Conversely, we already knew Jalen Waddle thought it was going to be like a top 5, top 8, top 10 pick, right? We knew Jamar Chase was going to be a top end pick, right? We knew that, guys like Najee Harris and Travis Etienne would probably get good draft capital. So those of you guys that know that can already build that into your risk profile. And that's why it's an edge. Like whenever I think about fantasy, whenever I'm playing fantasy, right, I want to play when there's as little like public information out as possible, if that makes sense, right? Because like once draft capital is released, it really erases a lot of your edge. Those of you guys that use analytics for wide receivers, that know which wide receivers can be good and can have draft capital, right? Those of you that follow good film guys, that put out the analysis in the offseason, those of you that follow college football, like there was a big edge to be had. So a lot of my leagues, D-Gen leagues, are doing drafts. Not a lot, but some of them are doing drafts ahead of the NFL draft for that very reason, right? And they might be, the good thing is they'll usually happen after the NFL Combine. So you'll get another input in terms of their athleticism. So you don't like draft like a total bum running back that like, runs like a 4.48 or something, right? You don't want that. So that eliminates it through the Combine. But I think for the most part, it's really good for those that have information asymmetry. Sorry, that have a skill and knowledge asymmetry to do drafts when there is less information out there. It's kind of like the same thing as when I do redraft leagues. Like I like doing my redraft leagues a little bit earlier because I know that the drafts are going to catch up. That's why I start doing best ball drafts like in February, March. I'm always doing best ball draft because the ADP doesn't catch up until way later. Same thing for dynasty rookie draft. So I really encourage you guys to go out there and play in a D-Gen league where you do the draft before the NFL draft. It's actually pretty damn fun. Okay. Now going into the strategy component. So if you look at my ranks right now, right, in my rookie ranks, you're going to see wide receivers at the top of the list, right? And I want to go into why, because normally I'm always preaching like don't go wide receiver early because, wide receivers are very replaceable, et cetera. But the reason why this class is a little bit different, compared to prior classes, as you guys know, in 2020, I had Jonathan Taylor, at the top of the list. I had like DeAndre Swift, Cam Akers. I had all those running backs like ahead of the wide receivers. Didn't even turn out right because Jefferson went ham, right? But for the most part, I put those QBs and I put the running backs ahead of them because those are the high impact positions, and those are the guys that can really change the league, right? You hit on Justin Jefferson, as great as he is in terms of value, right? In terms of trading value, he does not really have the same impact on your team's win percentage as hitting on a Jonathan Taylor, right? As hitting on a Joe Burrow, for example, as hitting on a Justin Herbert even, right? Because the position is just not as valuable. But when you're drafting rookie drafts in early season, you want to avoid landmines. You always want to avoid landmines, but if you're drafting before draft capital, you want to avoid landmines even more, because I think about rookie drafts before the NFL draft as like leveraged returns on leveraged risk on rookie drafts post NFL draft, because there's a lot of information they don't. Even if we think we know a lot, right, there's still a lot of risk. So what I'm trying to do is avoid landmines and have other people take on those landmines. And to me, there are landmines everywhere in this class from the draft capital perspective, other than some of the wide receivers. Like I would be shocked if Treylon Burks fell out of the first round, right? So I have a locked in first round wide receiver with elite athleticism, like DK Metcalf level, like uber athlete, right? And then on top of that, he smashes across the board in every single analytical metric that matters, whether it's market share of receiving yards, yards per team pass attempt, yards per team pass attempt over conference average, yards per team pass attempt over team average. He is just an absolute freak of nature, right? So when you get to borrow a term from one of our favorite friends of the show, Drew Ozenchuk, aka at DF Bean Counter, aka Bulletproof Fantasy, I think Treylon Burks is probably going to be in that like elite tier of prospect, right? So he is currently my 1.01. I used to have Garrett Wilson as 1.01, but I covered this in the prior episode. His production kind of fell off in his junior year, so I couldn't really justify it anymore. So Treylon Burks is my 1.01, right, of the rookie draft. And then I have Garrett Wilson. And then I have Drake London as well. And this kind of bridges over from my Devy analysis, right? Like in Devy leagues, I prioritize the same thing because there's so much risk in Devy, especially at running back and quarterback. Like there's so much turnover. Like look at all the people that took friggin' DJ. I'm not gonna butcher his last name, but DJ, who was one of the top quarterback prospects coming into this season, was often going at the 1.01 overall, ahead of like can't miss guys like Bijan Robinson, which was mind-boggling to me. But I rarely take quarterbacks that early because you don't have enough information that early to make a true freshman quarterback or a sophomore quarterback as your 1.01. Things can change at the drop of a hat. Like Joe Burrow was not the 1.01 until his last year, right? And Justin Fields was a non-factor in his freshman year, and he blew up in his sophomore and junior seasons, right? Zach Wilson was not a factor until his last year. So there's so much swings in the quarterback position, and there's so much swings in the running back position, especially true freshman running backs. Like, that is the true gambler's paradise. So I don't really swing too hard on those. What I do, though, is sophomore and junior wide receivers, because by your junior year, like before you even start your junior year, some of the elite prospects are already known, like, right? Like we already know like Jackson Smith is an elite 2023 wide receiver. We already know that the LSU wide receiver, why am I totally blanking on his name? Keyshawn Boutte. Okay, yeah, Keyshawn Boutte. We already know that he's going to be a top end prospect in 2023 because they had true freshman breakout seasons, and then they stacked on top of that with the sophomore year. So there's so much more information available at wide receiver for those that are paying attention. Obviously, you have guys that don't give a shit about analytics, think analytics are just for nerds. Doesn't matter, numbers don't tell the whole story, yada yada yada, whatever bullshit story you've heard of before. But for those of you guys in the know that are paying attention, you can dissect that data and really identify some of these higher end prospects early on. Now, it doesn't mean it's foolproof, right? It doesn't mean you don't pick up landmines like Brian Edwards or Tyler Johnson, right? Or guys like that. But it's a lot less risky than the running back position. Like running back position can flip at a dime a hat. Like look at Kevin Harris, right? 1K yards last season, running in the SEC, was one of the high end running backs. This season, complete non-factor, right? Now, you have exceptions to that rule, like you have Travion Henderson and the Bijan Robinsons of the world who are playing for top programs, broke out as true freshmen, and will continue to stack on top of that. But those are very, very rare, right? So once you see that, you got to capitalize on it. But for the most part, my Devy strategy is built around wide receivers because I think wide receivers hold and gain the most value as they increase, right? Because like analytics is a leading indicator for wide receivers, in my opinion, especially for college drafting prospects. So when you look at the analytics, it tells you really early like what some of these good guys are going to be. And then eventually, like the film guys catch up, because what a lot of film guys do is they go and look at the guys with the best stats, right? Naturally, to try and see if they're going to be good. And then when those two things align, that's when you have a jackpot hit. So for me, that's why I'm always in my DMs. I'm messaging guys like Angelo Fantasy. I'm messaging the Ray GQs. I'm messaging Jetpack Galileo. I'm messaging these guys. I'm asking them, like, what do you think of these prospects that I really like from a numbers perspective? And if they tell me, like, yo, that guy stinks and doesn't kill Harry, I have a red flag on them. But if they tell me, yo, this guy can ball, he's a fucking baller, then I'm all in, right? That's why, like, last year when I was looking at Jalen Waddle before the draft capital came in, I was messaging Angelo. I was talking to him in DMs. I was messaging Jetpack Galileo. They were the ones that gave me messaging Ray GQ. They're the ones that gave me the confidence to say, hey, like the numbers here are like a little bit sketchy, but there's enough to like, combined with the high film grade, combined with my future projections of where he's going to go in the NFL draft. All those factors combined before the NFL draft gave me the confidence to say, okay, Jalen Waddle is going to be a top 3, top 4 wide receiver for me in this class, right? So there's just a lot of information. And in this class where quarterback is weak, we don't know where the draft capital is going to land. Like it's really all over the map. Like one of my favorite quarterbacks is Sam Howell, but he's currently projected to go in like the middle of the first round, right? And that's not really elite draft capital. And you got Malik Willis, who knows where he goes, right? He can go anywhere from top 10 to like bottom, like second round. Like we just don't know these things. So there's a lot more misinformation there, lack of information there. And then on the running backs, I love Breece Hall, right? I love Breece Hall, but is he a first round running back? Probably not, right? But I also didn't think that Najee Harris and Travis Etienne were first-round running backs, but they both went in the first round. So maybe because it's a shallow draft class, people are going to reach on like a Breece Hall or an Isaiah Spiller, but we don't know any of those inputs. So if you're drafting before the NFL draft, I'm trying to avoid landmines. I don't want to be the guy that drafts a Michael Carter early because I think he's going to go in the second and he lands in the fourth round. I don't want to be that guy, right? I just don't want to be the guy that picks up those landmine running backs. So to me, the safest way to play the game is to go wide receiver. And we have wide receiver is the strongest position group of this class. And we've seen a ton of good wide receiver classes. Now, that doesn't mean because we saw a good 2020, 2019, 2021 that we're going to see a good 2022. But the numbers seem to indicate that 2022 is filled with a lot of really, really good prospects, right? You have Trillon Brooks, you have Drake London, and you have Garrett Wilson. I think that's the big three of the class. And I feel much more comfortable if I'm drafting at this stage of the season to put draft capital in them than to put draft capital even in a Breece Hall or a Sam Howell or a Malik Willis or a Matt Corral. Because honestly, especially with Matt Corral getting the injury, I don't know where they're going to go. And I thought Matt Corral was a really good quarterback, right? But don't get me wrong. But like, he doesn't have the running upside that I would want to spend a 1.01 on, right? Whereas I would rather spend it on like a Trillon Burks and see if he can explode into not a Justin Jefferson or a Jamar Chase, because it's not fair, but let's see if he can explode into like a CeeDee Lamb type value. If he can explode into that type of valuation range, like a DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, right? If he can get there, that is a very, very good that is a very, very good risk-adjusted rate of return. What do I mean by that? Is it true that Breece Hall or Matt Corral or Malik Willis or Sam Howell, can they exceed Trillon Burks in value a year from now, 3 months from now? Of course it's possible. Let's say if Sam Howell goes in the top 5, he immediately jumps Trillon Burks, right? But if he doesn't, then you're like worse off, because so it's like, if I think about it, to me, investing in a quarterback, investing in running back right now is a very, very higher risk move. So even though there's slightly more upside, to me that slight upside does not really justify taking on that additional risk, right? So I'm trying to avoid landmines. I talk about this all the time. Like, everyone focuses on trying to land darts, trying to land lottery picks and rookie drafts. I spend very little time trying to research like third round, fourth round draft picks, right? I'll spend my time picking like a couple that I like. For the most part, I'm just going to let ADP fall where it may and shoot a couple darts where I can, right? I spend very little time there because I want to focus all of my time on the top of the draft, because I think fading landmines is the best way to securely use your draft capital and get the best risk-adjusted rate of return, right? We're not very good. Like, as an entire community populace, I don't care who you are, if you're like the best player in the world, we as an entire populace, we're not very good at identifying who is really good. That's just a matter of fact. But what we are good at doing by way of analytics is trying to weed out the guys that are really bad. Or not really bad, but the guys that are low likelihood to hit. That's what analytics is. Like, when I think about analytics, I'm not thinking about, hey, this analytics is going to tell me who's going to be a slam dunk, right? It can do that sometimes with Jamar Chase. For the most part, what analytics tells me is like, yo, fade this guy. Like, do not put your draft capital in this guy because there's too much risk there. And that's my approach to draft. So by way of weeding out all the risk at the top of the draft, I'm naturally going to lean towards more high probability hits. And that's what happens over the course of my career. Over the course of my years of playing Dynasty, I have way more hits than misses because I just like avoid the high risk bets, right? For the most part, especially when the return does not justify the reward. Now, once draft capital comes out, if Breece Hall goes in the first round, he probably comes at 1.01, right? But I don't know that. And I don't have a great amount of confidence that he will go in the first round. I have some confidence that he's going to go in day 2, but whether he goes in round 2, early round 2, or later on day 2, I don't know. So, and there's no way that I would want to pick a running back that gets drafted in the third round over a first round wide receiver. If you think back to 2019, a lot of people did that with David Montgomery, and I thought it was a mistake then. I think it's a mistake now. It's just as big a mistake as someone drafting like a day 3 running back over a day 2 wide receiver at the bottom of the first or top of the second, like last year, right? I think those are very, very bad moves to make. So for me, when I look at this class, it's going to be wide receiver focused for me in the next little bit. It's going to be the Trillon Burks of the class. It's going to be the Garrett Wilsons, and it's going to be the Drake Londons. And that's what I think the optimal way of approaching a risky rookie draft, or approaching a risky Devy draft even. Like, you want to eliminate risk as much as possible, because it's so easy. It's so easy for one bad turn to crater the value of a Devy or rookie player, right? Especially if you're drafting before the combine. Because if you think about it, wide receivers have the least amount of hurdles to clear. And that's how I think about it, right? That's why I draft wide receiver heavy in Devy, is because if you think about the life of a running back, right? They have to be really good in college and productive, for sure, right? But then they have to clear the combine. They have to run a certain speed, right? For me, like if you're just a slow ass running back, I get it. Some guys can still be good like that, but for the most part, if you go out there and put up a 4.7, like, I'm just not going to draft you, right? And then they have to clear and that compared to wide receiver, like wide receivers, they have to be somewhat athletic too, but they don't have to be the most athletic. Like, look at T. Higgins. He had a pro day, a pretty horrific pro day, but he's still a very, very good wide receiver, and we knew that from his production. And then when he got the draft capital, it was fine. The difference between him and Tyler Johnson got no draft capital, so he didn't really have much opportunity to play. So that's the difference. But wide receiver, like, there is little to no correlation between what a wide receiver tests in the combine and how they produce in the NFL. And the reason being that there's so many other things that matter more for wide receivers than just being able to run fast, right? Like if you get drafted by an NFL team, my base assumption is you've cleared the hurdle for athleticism to be useful in the NFL, right? To be a good player in the NFL. Look at Keenan Allen, look at like Michael Thomas. Like, none of these guys are world beaters, right? And they can still be very, very good. Now, I do believe that having an elite level of athleticism, like at the very, very high end and at the very, very shitty end, it probably matters in the long run. But for the most part, there's very little correlation like between testing well at the NFL Combine versus producing. So for a wide receiver, if they go out and run a little bit slower, they test a little bit less, or not a top percentile athlete, I care about that a lot less than running back, where it is more heavily reliant on athleticism. Like if you're a wide receiver that gets drafted highly, right, and you don't have the NFL Combine metrics to back it up, chances are you have some other skill set, whether it's ability to run routes, set defenders up, high pointing the ball, contested catch ability, whatever it is, you have some other trump card that can help make up for the lack of athleticism, right? Running back is a lot harder because running backs don't have very much impact on the game because they're relying on the O-line, right? So if you don't have a good O-line and you don't have good athleticism, like, it's pretty much over for you. There's not much you can do, right? For a wide receiver, all you have to do is beat the guy across from you. Now, O-line plays a factor as well and quarterback as well, but it's just not to the same degree as a offensive line for running backs, which is where the running backs don't matter mantra comes from, is that they just have a very, very low impact in the game. So for me, that is one massive hurdle that running backs have to clear with flying colors, or at least at a much higher hurdle rate than a wide receiver has to. So that's one gating factor. Then comes draft capital, right? For running back, like, draft capital is everything, right? Because if you don't have draft capital, you're not going to get opportunity to get on the field. And for running back, like, opportunity is everything, right? It's as simple as getting on the field. That's why you see so many shitty running backs can produce fantasy numbers as long as they're getting the touches on the field, right? For wide receiver, it's a lot different, right? It's wide receiver, it's just a skill game. So draft capital is obviously also very, very important. But being like a wide receiver, you can kind of overcome a lot of it with talent. So like, there's two hurdles. They both have to clear that hurdle for sure. Don't get me wrong, but the running back has to clear the combine hurdle and the draft capital hurdle, right? But luckily, when you don't clear the combine hurdle, chances are you're not going to clear the draft capital hurdle, whereas wide receiver, you can. So that's what I mean when I say, like, there's way less hurdles and way less barriers to wide receivers getting on the field and finding success than a running back. Because also, remember, there's always 2 to 3 wide receivers on the field at the same time. So even if you're not the top guy, you can still get a lot of opportunities. So for me, when it comes down to it, right, it just comes down to those main factors of trying to reduce the risk. So when I'm drafting early, when I'm drafting Devi, wide receiver is usually the name of the game, unless you get a 2023 class with an stellar running back room like Bijan Robinson, Tank Bigsby, etc. Right? When you get that, then you can kind of deviate from the path. But this year, where there's weak quarterbacks, weak running backs, draft capital is in the air, it's not too clear where people are going to go. I do think that wide receiver is the move, right? So that's what I'm focusing on going into my rookie drafts within this next month or so, and I believe that's also what you should be running back. But one other thing I want to touch on real quick is you'll notice that Treylon Burks is my wide receiver 1, but he is pretty far down in my ranks. So I think I have the 1.01 at, like, 3rd or 4th round, maybe 5th round draft capital. But that's also because I'm trying to attach a player to the name. If you just gave me the 1.01, that's going to be a premium, because not everyone has Treylon Burks with 1.01. Some people might have Breece Hall, some people might have Matt Corral, whatever, and that option value is worth something. So just because you see Treylon Burks in my ranks at a certain spot, if you're actually trading the 1.01, that does not mean you should trade him there. It means that 1.01 should definitely at least be 1 to 2 rounds of premium ahead of where I have my first player ranked, because of the option value, because of the factor that if you have the 1.01 and you don't need to use it before the NFL draft, for example, you still have that upwards trajectory of the value between now and the NFL draft, right? So So make sure you account for that in when you're looking at my ranks. It's not just as simple as taking the Traylon Burks and making the 1.01 because of the time gap and the option value of having that pick. So that is one key difference I just want to cover really, really quickly before we hop off. But that's all I got for you guys this week. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did enjoy, head on down, click the little subscribe button, hit the thumbs up if you like the video. It helps me more than you know. Hit the little bell button so you can get notifications if you for future videos like this. And lastly, again, you won't have to do that for longer because you'll have to move over to the main BDG channel to catch a lot more Dynasty content as we consolidate. But I will also have that link in the channel in the comments down below. All right. So, yeah. And then lastly, as always, come and check out the Dynasty Wolf Pack. Patreon.com/OurPack. That's patreon.com/OurPack. In my opinion, the best Dynasty community. If you want to talk about Dynasty football, trades, start sits, drafts, value, etc., we are going all year long, 24/7. A lot of big brains in the chat helping you along. And also, if you're into NFTs, you're into crypto, I have a NFT crypto channel. It's not a financial advice channel. It's not a shilling channel. I don't go on there to show my own bags, show my own projects. That's not really my thing. If you go in there, you'll see. If you're in the alpha, if you're an alpha member, you'll get access to Discord. It's other guys that are throwing ideas around. I'm literally just going in there talking about projects that I kind of like, that I have invested in. And sometimes people follow me, sometimes they don't. Sometimes people share me stuff that I don't know about and I learn about. It's just a little tiny subset community of the Patreon, of the Wolf Pack, that likes to degen the way I do, right? And you know, I've done well for myself in NFTs up until now, so I try and share what I can. You know, it's up to other people to take that advice or not. But again, it's not financial advice. It's really just me talking about shit that I like, projects that I like, and then it's up to you to figure out whether you like it too or you don't. And you know, that's all it is. So make sure you guys go on and check that out. Patreon.com/OurPack. But yeah, that's all I got for you guys this week. Until next time, peace.